I've done lots of these on Zoom. It's a little bit different in person, but it's been great to kind of see everyone in the community be live and hear great stories about founders building stuff and how investors see everything. So before I get started, I wanted to share a really quick little Mill Valley story. Did you guys see this the Pearl Jam story about the drummer from Mill Valley? You guys see that? So that kid, Kai Nukermans, is best friends with my son, Sebastian Chen. They're both seniors. And he's always over our house. And like literally 3 weeks ago, I said to him, don't forget the little guys when you make it big. So, because he's a really good drummer. It's awesome to see what he's doing. So what we're doing is, basically we built a platform for financial planning and management. And you can think of it like the TurboTax for planning. And so the reason I started this company is that my mom came to my brother and I in her 60s, and she's like, hey, I need to figure out, I need to borrow some money, is actually what she said. And we're like, okay, we can definitely help you, but we'd rather outsource this problem, not have to write you checks, figure out how to kind of get you on, secure your future and make you feel confident so you can live the life you want to live. And we looked around, and we really couldn't find a good solution in the market. So she didn't have, her net worth was like $300,000. A lot of it was tied up in the house. And and no advisor really knew about decumulation and really wanted to take her on as a client. So we're like, okay, we got to figure this problem out. And we did it ourselves on spreadsheets. And we looked, when we solved this problem, it was, thinking about Social Security, Medicare, how do you draw down your assets, how are you going to pay for healthcare, how are you going to spend your time? Should you move and relocate? All these things. How are you going to be tax efficient? So it was a really complicated problem. And so we ended up doing it. And then we looked around and said there's 120 million people in this country over age 50, and they have 80% of the wealth. They have pretty much all the money, but everyone's kind of worried about this problem, like how I'm going to pay for my life. So that's how we kind of came to the problem. And as Zach knows, it's been a little bit of a journey, but here we are. So okay. So for many folks, so this slide is probably, less funny now, right? Like after last week. But unfortunately, it's like a real situation. So the average person approaching retirement has $150,000 saved. So it's really not a lot of money, and they have to plan for this indefinite amount of time, hedge inflation, think about healthcare, all this complexity, and how do we get here? So originally, you worked until you died. That was phase one. Then we had pensions. Then pensions got replaced by 401ks. And essentially, every person has to become their own CFO. So they have to kind of take on this challenge and think through all this complexity themselves. And it's really difficult to solve this problem. And that's kind of how we got to the state of the world today, which is most people are worried about this. They really don't have, there's really not a great unified solution in this space, but there's a lot of money at stake, and there's a lot of huge companies working the problem. So a couple more slides on kind of the underlying problems, and then I'll get into kind of what we're doing. So basically, the first big problem is that financial literacy in this country is terrible. Like, nobody knows anything about money, and why is that? Well, we don't teach it in high schools. Like, we teach poor kids how to repair car engines. I'm talking to my kids, and they're like, I'm in auto, and I'm like, it sounds great. Is anyone teaching you about money? It's like, money being taught about personal finance is only required in 20% of high schools. So it's really, it's like we send these kids in the world, and then they're taking on student loans, 6 figures of student loans, like credit cards or whatever, and they're starting off in a terrible situation that leads to, bad outcomes. So that's the first problem. Oops. So the second big problem is that we're all human beings, and we can't control our emotions. And you get to results like this. It's when you look at the data, the average investor gets like a 2 to 3% return over their lives. So you need to save your money and invest over your entire life cycle to achieve a good outcome. And once we put everyone in charge of doing their own money, what you get is pretty poor returns. And it's pretty much beaten by every other asset class. It's because folks, can't, they basically get like weeks like last week or things like crypto. They suck people in, they got all excited, they throw their money in, things tank, things get destroyed, and then people leave the market and they don't keep investing, and they don't capture those returns. and unfortunately it leads to bad outcomes. Anyway, so that's kind of how we got to the state of the world today. So what we're doing is we're working on delivering financial planning, which doesn't sound super exciting, but it solves a lot of problems. And the reason we're doing this is that it works. So people with financial plans have 3 times the money of people without plans. And it's because they think about it, they develop good behaviors about saving and investing, and very often it's tied with an advisor, so they'll end up making good choices over a long period of time. The analogy in my mind, it's like exercise. So, we didn't know that exercise was good for us until like the 1940s. And then once we discovered that, the whole like Nike, I don't know if you read Shoe Dog, but that story's in Shoe Dog. It's like all these, the whole exercise culture kind of came about. And so we think a similar kind of thing is going to happen with financial wellness, that people are figuring out that, hey, you got to invest in this, you got to teach people these good habits, and that can lead to much better outcomes. So what we're doing is we're kind of rolling out our company in phases. So phase 1, it's like we have built the Google Docs of planning. So it's a collaborative planning platform. It is also, there's a lot of literacy stuff and education tied into it. And basically, it's available at a super low cost. We have a freemium model, so it's free, or you can pay like $120 a year, or you can get wrap coaching around it, or classes around it, or get to an advisor. It's on a flat fee basis. So it's a completely different model than the traditional white glove. Hey, I go meet with my wealth advisor. If I have a lot of money, I give him my $1 million. He charges me 1%, which is $10,000 a year, and he takes care of all this stuff. We think that model is going to come under pressure. It's not going to grow as fast as these other models. And that model doesn't scale anyway. I mean, they can only serve wealthy people, and most people don't have that kind of wealth. And then phase 2 is really like Google Maps of planning. So we're going to automate all this stuff, leverage data and machine learning to kind of help people make much better decisions. So we started direct to consumer, and we've definitely, I think we've proven a lot. So this was the first phase of our business, and it's, like other founders, it's like first it was free, we weren't even charging people, then we started charging people and seeing if they would pay. So we have now, a couple 100,000 people a month coming to our site. We've had 500,000 podcast downloads. We have sent all these newsletters. We've 200,000 people with $200 billion have built financial plans for themselves. We have about 8,000 people paying us now. And the thing is, these people are managing $15 billion. We have 10, 11,000 people in a Facebook group. So it's kind of a very different approach. And it's a much more kind of like, instead of one-to-one, it's, one-to-many or many-to-many. And I think what really is different is we are learning so much faster with this community than most other providers in the space. It's not just the software, it's the whole experience that we bring to people. And we're supporting this with a small number of people on our team. So if you want to try the product, go ahead. I encourage everyone to build a financial plan, and you can, use our solution. There's also, we're making it available via, API as well to big companies, and that's kind of getting to the second part of our business. People really like it. We have a net promoter score of 65. Apple's is like 70. The average financial services company is like 40. This is what the model looks like. So basically, free tooling and free education, free content that anyone can get access to. Then there's, you can kind of go through the different phases. So, paid software, coaching, classes. Classes was a big thing for us. We just turned that on. We had 500 people sign up for the first class, which is pretty interesting, and pay us to take a class about how to build a retirement plan. So we're educating hundreds of people at a time right now. It's a different dynamic. It's like going to an exercise class. People doing it together, holding each other accountable. There's a whole behavioral side of this thing that helps people achieve better outcomes, which is the main goal. And then we have also added like access to an advisor, so you can get access to a financial advisor. Okay, so I think I'm way over, but just real quick, now we're going enterprise. So we've rolled it out to MarketWatch. We just went live with Nationwide. So like Nationwide's calling our API millions of times a month. So that's really what we see scaling this business, and is injecting this technology through other companies to their markets. We're rolling it out with a big plan sponsor, one of the top 5. They have 230,000 employees that will get access to this platform for a very low cost. And then we're also, you can apply it to other financial decisions like mortgage and autos and different kinds of solutions. So, I talked a little bit before about where we're going with regard to mapping. Essentially the future is capturing tons of data, applying machine learning, really helping to surface good decisions for people, and then automating a lot of this stuff and driving transaction fees really low. Like one of the panelists earlier talked about, they built the always-on like pre-approved loan. To me, that makes perfect sense. I'm like, I was wondering, I pinged him on LinkedIn, but why hasn't someone built this? So it's awesome to see someone build that. We think that all these decisions, like should I refinance, should I get a HELOC, should I change my insurance, should I change my investments, all that stuff is integrated. These decisions are tied together, and we need a lot of this can be automated, and transaction fees can be driven really low. And so our vision is to deliver a platform that does this primarily through software, distributed through other companies, and ultimately kind of disrupt the space and drive fees down. So that's it. Thank you.